Welcome back. You're watching Judes & Co with me, Miriam Cates, and keeping me company until 7 o'clock, I've got Jaymey McIvor and Stuart Fawcett. Now, President Donald Trump has warned that Europe risks civilisational erasure unless it dramatically reduces migration. Well, a new US national security strategy document signed off by the president claims that the continent could become unrecognisable in 20 years or less if current trends continue, with some nations potentially becoming majority non-European. Now, this paper, which sets out the Trump administration's global priorities, also argues that Europe's migration policies are fueling strife, censorship of free speech and suppression of political opposition. So, panel, do we think that Europe is facing a civilisational erasure, as Trump warns? Jaymey, let's start with you. I mean, firstly, what a marked difference in Trump compared to the Joe Biden administration, who were uninterested in Europe, certainly didn't see any kind of civilisational challenge. And now we've got this Trump government, Vance particularly, openly concerned about what's happening in Europe. Do you welcome that?
Well, I think what you can call this is an upgrade in presidency and an upgrade in administration. And I think Trump actually feels the feeling of the British people more than our own Prime Minister does, because actually, I'm from Essex. When I canvass, I knock on people's doors. As they say, they've recently moved to this part of Essex. And when you ask them why, they say because where they live now is unrecognisable to the place that they moved into. And that's not just a conversation about immigration. It's the entire cultural dynamics. It's the fact that your children at Easter don't get to have the Easter celebrations that I would have had when I was at school. It's the fact that you see graffiti all over every single bit of public transport. It's the fact that you see in places like Whitechapel a translation, not into a language on the near continent, a translation of the name of the station. It's the fact that you go through somewhere like the East End of London and you see places that you once would have played as a child, which my grandparents frequently tell me, and these places are now so dangerous that you can't walk there in the daytime, let alone nighttime. So the entire way of life of the British people is under threat. Too many people aren't talking about it, and it's happening across Europe. I think the scene that horrified me and has made me so determined politically was the horrific video I saw of Whitechapel, packed full of people basically chanting that English people weren't welcome anymore. And I think what we are seeing is a horrific takeover. It's scary. It's scary for English people. It's scary for British people, but it's also happening everywhere in Europe.
Your personal data could be exposed right now without you even knowing it. And if you want it removed, use incogni.com/GB News in the description now and get 60% off an annual plan on us. Incogni reach out to the data brokers on your behalf and request that your information be deleted from their databases. And they'll keep sending removal requests to make sure your data stays gone. Sometimes your information ends up on strange, obscure websites that automated tools just can't reach. And that's why Incogni just launched their unlimited plan with a feature called custom removals. With this, you can submit any link where your personal information appears, literally paste in the URL, and their privacy team will investigate and work to get it removed. And getting started is super easy. Hit the link in the description, create an Incogni account, and tell them whose data you want removed. Grant them permission to work on your behalf, and then all you've got to do is sit back and relax. They'll keep you updated along the way. Incogni is totally risk-free for 30 days. If you try it, it's not for you, you'll get a full refund. So take back control of your personal data today with Incogni. Use our code GBNews at checkout via the link in the description, and you'll get 60% off an annual plan.
I mean, Jaymey, that's right, isn't it? Western Europe particularly has seen such enormous immigration levels over the last 20 years that really Europe will be, Trump's right, it'll be unrecognisable in 20 years.
We've had a serious evolution within a generation of demographics within, let's talk about European Union states. Obviously, there's free movement within there, and Britain before Brexit was part of that free movement, so it's had a proportional impact upon it. Also, we've had a large imprint upon the world, and many people have an identity with Britain, and therefore they've come here through various different routes over the last sort of 80 years. Just want to come back to what President Trump there is saying, and I think President Trump seasons 2 is really looking up at the minute, whether we compare it with President Biden or not. But a lot of impact on the world there, and what he's seeing here, what I believe he wants to protect, is fundamentally the basis of what we call NATO. I think the Americans want to see a safe and secure Europe, and part of that is about their cultural identity. And perhaps what he's seeing is a shift in demographics that people perhaps wouldn't normally attribute to European identity across different nationalities. That's now being impacted by those changes and within itself because of the nature of the European Union. But I think fundamentally the good reason is that America wants Europe as an ally. And their strategic assessment is that going to continue? Is the basis of our agreement, especially with NATO, going to continue if the culture moves in that direction? I believe it is, and I believe it is because I think states like Britain and other states in the European Union are capable of having robust conversations about cultural change.
No, we're not.
Well,
you get locked away for it.
I think that's a little bit extreme because I think we can have cultural conversations where we say, actually, diversity, inclusion, whatever you want to call it, there is a barrier at which we need to say, I'm sorry, this particular culture is not compatible with British culture or French culture or German culture.
But you see, there's hardly any voices on the left saying that. And I completely agree with what you're saying. I was at a conference in Brussels yesterday and on Wednesday, which is a right-wing conference, but talking openly about these issues in a debate that perhaps was being shut down a couple of years ago. But I think it is much more on the agenda now. But it's all very well to talk about it. What are we going to do about it?
Well, look, the leader of my party, Nigel Farage, is regularly talking about this and having grown-up conversations, and the Prime Minister likes to call him racist. He gets shouted at in a House of Commons, all sorts of things, and he can't even finish his sentence. We can't have robust debate about this. We can't have grown-up conversations about immigration, the fact that our communities are becoming unrecognisable, because you're immediately shut down. As a councillor, I get investigated for my tweets about it. It's just absurd, because I might dare to say that there are some cultures in the world that are not compatible with Britain, because that is true. Let's not forget that within 8 days of an illegal migrant being in a town where I live, a young girl was sexually assaulted, and in court the man said, the defendant said, where I'm from, the rules aren't as strict. This is factual, but people are not able to have this conversation because, firstly, and this is the worst thing when it comes to freedom of speech, people are too scared. As a councillor, how many times do my residents say, I know I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm a bit concerned for what's going on with immigration. There's nothing wrong with that, but unfortunately, people on the left, I'm not suggesting you personally, people on the left have made it so toxic. People like me get called a fascist because I dare to say that immigration's got out of control.
Stuart.
I think the issue where this has come from is that for so long, the conversation of immigration immediately has been rejected out of hand. So to have a reasonable, moderate view and a concern around immigration has been rejected by mainstream politics for too long, and therefore that conversation has been taken in by other people with other motives. So that definitely has happened. On what you were saying there about freedom of speech, I think it's very important that we retain our freedom of expression. We have a different system to that of America, and obviously in the president's eyes, they would like to see freedom of speech without any curtailment, essentially. However, we do have protections in place because of freedom of expression rather than freedom of speech in the American sense. And that does prevent incitement and other elements which, whilst they don't automatically lead to violent action, they essentially load the gun in order to do it.
It's different.
And that, exactly. So we have a cultural difference, but we have values in common.
Can I just move away from immigration for a second, because it's not just immigration that Trump highlighted. He also talked about low birth rates in Europe. Now, America is also suffering from declining birth rates, but in some European countries now, we've got total fertility rates of 1.1 or 1.2 children per woman, which basically means that in a few generations' time, native European populations will have almost collapsed. Even if we solved immigration tomorrow, we're still looking at the end of Europe. What are we going to do about collapsing birth rates?
Well, and this is something that made me believe that actually our policy on the two-child benefit cap was appropriate for British natives of our country, because what we have got to think about, what sort of army are we going to have in the future? What sort of country are we going to have when we can't talk about some basic cultural thing?
But that's a great argument, but it's nowhere near enough. I mean, look, Hungary spending 5% of their GDP every year on huge tax breaks for women who have children, way more than anything that Reform are currently considering, and yet they've seen a very slight uptick in their birth rate.
Look, I don't think you can force nature. I don't think that's possible. But what I think is important that we don't sit here thinking if only we had done something. So I think if there is an apparatus that can encourage more people to have children, whether that's affordability and many other things, just the fact you can't buy a house where I live for less than £1 million. This is that's big for a big family. So there's a lot of other things, and I think we've got to say in 10 years' time, did we do everything we possibly could?
Yeah, but you talk about changing nature there. I don't think it's about changing nature. I think it's about influencing our culture more positively. GB News readers will read today about an article I've written on the Great British Family, which is fundamentally in decline, sadly. And that was at one stage a thing that Britain was held in high regard for, was because of our social fabric made up of very strong, cohesive family units. And I don't think we should be coy about that, and it has faced a decline. I think our birth rate's about 1.4 at the moment. It's very low. And there are several cultural factors which intertwine with economic factors, which make it really difficult for young people to go and have children. I understand the argument sometimes is, well, if you can't afford to have children, don't have them. And increasingly, that is now what is happening. And I think that is, as you say, there are plenty of things where the state intervenes and it provides support. And I think it's appropriate to ensure that children are enabled to be welcomed into this world without threat of poverty in order to give them the best start in life. And I think there is a real opportunity now to influence the Great British Family once again and rebuild culture from that. But
we are looking at radical action if we're going to reverse the decline. I mean, the birth rate's been declining since the 1970s. It's showing no sign of turning around.
Look at the radical action that has actually changed the way we operate as a society. I think working from home being continued after COVID is one of the worst things ever. You're not going to meet...
It's actually a good thing for young mums, actually. Well, it might be a bad thing for businesses.
It might be after you've had a baby, for sure, but I don't think you're going to meet your future wife who you're going to have children with on a Zoom call. A lot of people used to meet. I mean, I look at my parents' generation, a lot of my friends' parents, they met at work in a city or something. That's not happening now. We've got a culture now, everyone's obsessed with their mobile phones, they're obsessed with working from home, and I think that's a big culture problem we've got to look at as well.
Now, this pronatalism argument was one that, I'm very much interested in, but it's very difficult to find anybody on the left who will talk about it. It's fantastic that you are. Josh Simons, the Labour minister, he talks about this a lot. But hardly any Labour MPs are willing to engage on this issue. They think that somehow helping women to have children, which they say they do want, is somehow, I don't know, a right-wing issue. Why is that?
I think we've had a capture of advancement of certain rights from the left's point of view for a long time, and I think perhaps some people are worried that that is going to curtail that, essentially. But I think we need to talk about equality and women's equality in that sense, which is, and it doesn't always have to be that this is a woman's place at all, but that managing a home and a family is an extremely difficult thing to do that perhaps myself I wouldn't be particularly great at either. But I have been a foster carer before and I've looked after children, and it is, I'm really sad to say, it's a vocation that is sadly in decline despite the need and demand for it. But it requires a lot of skills, a lot of management skills, that actually in the long term probably benefit your career quite well, that you might be not exposed to in the longer term. But I think we need to really value again the fact of family cohesiveness and management, and the fact that that is what the world of work can be centred around.
And I do feel, and I'm all for empowering women to do whatever they want, and I don't think women should be restricted in any way, but some women do just want to be really amazing mums at home, and why should that not be allowed? Yeah. We've bred now. If I was to come out and say I think we need to have more women at home looking after their children, I would be attacked, or probably will be for saying it, as I just have. But actually, there's a lot of women that would love to do that and just focus on bringing up their children to have effectively a perfect life, and why shouldn't we have that?
Well, every year the DfE does a survey about childcare, and every year 75-80% of women with children under 4 say they'd love to spend more time with their children if only they could afford to do that. Now, I'm going to interrupt because we can bring you an update from the 2025 World Cup draw. This is the World Cup next year. England has been drawn into Group L. So I hope that means something to you at home. We'll keep you updated on what teams they'll be playing in summer 2026. So let's hope it's not Germany, because we always seem to lose.